And good morning or good afternoon, wherever this might find you. I'm Pete Peterson, the very grateful dean of Pepperdine's Graduate School of Public Policy, and I am delighted to welcome you to today's webinar conversation, Opportunity Out of Diversity of Thought, with Dr. Shelby Steele and Eli Steele. A little bit of logistical background work. This will be a 1-hour conversation, and as with all of our webinars, we welcome your engagement in it. Questions will be welcome through the chat feature. Please, at any time during the webinar, feel free to enter your questions into the chat, and we will get to those in turn. Let's begin with introductions for today's speakers. First, to Eli Steele. Eli is an award-winning American filmmaker, and his latest film is What Killed Michael Brown. Steele's other films include How Jack Became Black, a documentary on identity politics, What's Bugging Seth, a narrative romantic comedy featuring a deaf man that won top prize at 12 film festivals, and Katrina, an MTV pilot that won him the Breakthrough Filmmakers Award. He has also produced over 18 short documentaries in the last 2 years, as well as Rooftop Revelations, a Fox series that featured stories from the South Side of Chicago for 100 consecutive days. Steele also writes widely on issues of race, politics, and public policy, and those writings have been featured in the LA Times, Fox News, and Commentary magazine. He is a graduate of Claremont McKenna, and we are proud to claim him as an alumnus of the School of Public Policy, where he graduated over 11 years ago. Shelby Steele is the Robert and Marion Oster Senior Fellow Adjunct at the Hoover Institution, where he specializes in the study of race relations, multiculturalism, and affirmative action. In 2006, he received the Bradley Prize for his contributions to the study of race in America. And in 2004, he was awarded the National Humanities Medal. In 1991, his work on the documentary 7 Days in Bensonhurst was recognized with an Emmy Award and 2 awards for television documentary writing, the Writers Guild Award and the San Francisco Film Festival Award. Steele received the National Book Critics Circle Award in 1990 in the general nonfiction category for his book, The Content of Our Character, A New Vision of Race in America. Other books by Steele include Shame, How America's Past Sins Have Polarized Our Country, White Guilt, How Blacks and Whites Together Destroyed the Promise of the Civil Rights Era, and A Dream Deferred, The Second Betrayal of Black Freedom in America. He is a member of the National Association of Scholars, and the National Board of the American Academy for Liberal Education, and the University Accreditation Association, as well as the National Board for the Center for the New American Community at the Manhattan Institute. Dr. Steele holds his PhD in English from the University of Utah, an MA in sociology from Southern Illinois University, and his BA in political science from Coe College in Iowa. With that, I will stop my screen share and welcome you all in. Dr. Steele and Eli, welcome to you both.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Thank you for having us.
So the topic that we have, the title that we have claimed for today's conversation is the importance of diversity of thought toward opportunity. One of the things that I wanted to discuss, and we'll leave that to a little bit later, is the creation of the new Shelby Steele Foundation. And so that certainly plays a role in creating opportunity out of diversity of thought. But maybe we should just start with this, with the importance of diversity of thought, particularly in the Black community. Dr. Steele, you have obviously been a leader in this area. Talk to me about why diversity of thought within any ethnic community is important, and maybe secondarily, why we're beginning to see more and more, whether it's Glenn Lowry or John McWhorter or Coleman Hughes, others, certainly Eli is leading in this area as well, why we're seeing a real flourishing, I would say, in diversity of thought within the Black community now.
Well, I think now is a good word, good term there. There was in the Black community coming out of the 1960s a certain repressive tone with regard to free and open thought. We were in a sort of militant phase, and the idea was that we kind of military discipline even in our thinking. And so certain points of view were seen as conspiring with the enemy and showing a sort of weakness of one's commitment. Well, I think that was a sad and dark period in our history. Still here, there are remnants of it certainly still alive today. But in any case, it left a space for people who wanted to be reasonable and look at the world as it really is, rather than at the sort of world that we imagine for ourselves in order to justify our militancy. And so I think inadvertently, really, but people like myself who sort of moving through a university career almost stumbled into this area where we said, what the heck, let's say what we really think. And without realizing, I think, suspecting, but not fully realizing the wrath that would bring down and the results of it. But that's why I think today there are people like Coleman Hughes, like my son Eli, like John McWhorter, like Glenn Lowry, and many, many others who now are filling that vacuum with, I think, really, for the first time in decades, original thinking and re-examining our situation in America. At least I'm trying to do that. Whether I succeed or not, I don't know, but that's certainly what I would like to do. We're in a very different, I think, much better situation than we sometimes give ourselves credit for.
I want to come back to the lens of academia and explore that a bit with you. You were on faculty, a professor at San Jose State for a couple decades. And so I think the lens of diversity of thought within academia is something I want to discuss. But before we get too much further, I'm sure many people who are on the Zoom screen now and others who will watch this are very familiar with your background. But I do think it's important to at least ground this in a little bit of your own personal history, Dr. Steele. You certainly started as an activist, growing up in a family of activists. And obviously, you saw a transition of both the civil rights movement and your own thinking about some of these things. I know this is a tough question to boil down to just a few minutes, but could you tell us a little bit to ground the conversation about your own personal philosophical journey and view of both the civil rights movement and obviously where you are today and the importance of having this diversity of thought?
I'll give it a stab. Yes, I was born into a family that was, I can tell stories. The day of my birth, my mother was put into a segregated maternity ward. So I was born right smack into the sort of embedded racism. I grew up in Chicago area, which was one of the most segregated cities in America. And so my parents were founding members of CORE, Congress of Racial Equality. And so our family was a community of people really in the late 40s, early 50s, 60s, and so forth, who were a part of the larger civil rights movement. You know, Martin Luther King was sort of a newcomer in our family. We wondered if he'd ever really pan out. So I had that kind of a background, and that was a very religious background in many ways. It was the early civil rights movement, we forget sometimes, came out of the Black church. King himself was a pastor. And so that was my faith when I sort of began to grow up and got to college. Civil Rights Act had passed. For the first time, the phrase Black Power was enunciated loudly all across America. And that would have been unheard of when I was growing up in the 50s to say anything like that. But it basically represented a transformation in Black America's point of view toward freedom. It said our identity is our real strength. And that's what is going to carry us forward and bring us to a state of equality with the rest of America and so forth. I flirted with Black Power, maybe a little more than flirted with it. And there is still a part of me that has that rage, that anger. It can be accessed. And most people I know of mine, because I remember what segregation was like. And I'm so thankful that other options finally began to open because of civil rights. I don't think I would have really survived Black Power had that not begun, if doors had not begun to actually open, if America had not begun to change. And but thank God it did. Much more profoundly than I ever thought it would. The America today has, I think, for the most part, conquered racism. I think Blacks are for the very first time in our history, absolutely free. The great, awesome oppression that we endured for centuries is broken. It has no respectable quarter anywhere in American life. And that, on a personal level, gave me a chance to build a life, to go to school, find a career, devote myself to it, raise a family, so forth. And so I'm grateful for that, and I think sometimes that today many Blacks sort of forget that things were so different, and that things are so much better now. And now is the time for us to sort of drop the protest. We've done that. We've won that battle. And now start to focus on our own development, becoming a people competitive in the modern world. And I think we're not in a position to do that. But that's sort of what, in a broad sense, my background has been in race relations and so forth.
I want to go to the discussion of why we think this might be happening now, this flourishing that I'm seeing with great Black thinkers, or thinkers that happen to be Black, but discussing issues of race. You're of that generation that this seems to be happening, Eli, and obviously you're a part of it as well. Do you have a sense, what's your thinking on why you think we're beginning to see this growing diversity of thought in the Black community happening, obviously through writing, through speaking, podcast, Substack, documentary filmmaking like you're leading on? Do you have a sense as to why we're seeing so much of this now?
I think it's happening on two levels. I think one is, I think it's thanks to the bravery of my father and people like Thomas Durrell in the 80s, for speaking up. Not only speaking up, but also standing the ground, which it's a very, very difficult thing to do, because if you were Black in the 80s or the 90s and you spoke up, you not only risk your family, you risk your career at, people be cancer today, but there's so many more places you go. Back then, it was total isolation. That's what my father writes about, the loneliness of a Black conservative. And so I know the price to be paid. It was even affecting my life. It was to the point, like if I was doing like online dating and I met somebody and they would ask like, well, who your father was, and I would say who he was, and I had to wait a moment to see, that's how much it affected my life in a way.
Wow.
So it wasn't all, happiness and stuff like that, but it was, I think, a struggle that, my sister, my mother, and my father, we knew it was important. And so I think that within our family, there was never any distance because we talked about it all the time over dinner and so forth. On the second part, during the rooftop revelation, spending the last 6 years on the south side of Chicago. People think I live there because I'm always there. And we would have conversations, whether it was in Pastor Bush's office or up on the tent on top of the roof. And we would have blasts from Bobby Rush would be there.
Mm-hmm.
Gang members would be there. You never really heard people talking about Black. They were just human beings talking about the problem, talking about the fact that there's not really any resources. So the conversation is sort of shifted from the Black identity and the race. Oh my God, we are in this wasteland where we have no opportunity, where there's really no independent stores, there's no business. It's just church, government offices, project. So how do we change that? And what's sort of interesting is that Pastor Bush refuses to go to race. He just refuses it because it's not that he doesn't believe in the idea or the racism is there. It's
right.
just have no time for it. It's such a crisis down there that if they reign, you lose another generation. So the conversation is really now turning to how do we fix the problem? They don't care about white privilege. They don't care about any of that. Those are luxuries, beliefs you have. It's more about what's the most pragmatic situation. How do we get this kid into, what's his talent? Okay, this is his talent. How do we get him to that place where he can use his talent? And so that's where the conversation is on that level. And I think that having people like my father, Thomas Dorrell, just hammer at the post-disease liberalism for so long has sort of exposed it for what it is. And then on the south side, you see the reality of what it is.
Yeah.
And then we have to fix it. So that's where they are right now.
Shelby, I want to come back to you about what it was like. Eli referred to that, especially during the 80s and 90s, as you're beginning to express heterodox opinions. Can you talk a little bit about first what I know in Thomas Sowell's story, he had started off as a progressive, but it was working at the city of New York where he began to see the failure of policies to live up to their stated intent. And that was the thing that really began to switch his own thinking. What was it for you, and what was it like? I mean, Eli's used the word courage to express heterodox opinions. Tell me a little bit about what that transition was and what those years in the 90s, 80s and 90s were like for you.
Well, they were, in a sense, they were rough. I lost every single friend that I had. I lost my family. I was published in very important and respectable journals and so forth. But that began to fade. I began to be canceled as cancellation became a sort of ideology of the left. You just don't pay attention to what the other side is saying. So the other side of that is that I for the first time in my life was able to live comfortably with myself. When I went to work at the university as an English professor and so forth, I no longer had to pretend that I wanted a Black Studies program when I knew Black Studies programs were terrible and were not new beginnings, but they represented the end of things. So at any rate, I began to then to understand that things were going to be different, that I had, and that was really on me. It wasn't on, no one else was making me do that. I had to do it. And I sort of still feel that way. And today, my feeling is a kind of immunity and a sort of selfish, I did the right thing. I don't know much. I'm no wiser or more talented than anybody else in American life. But I did the right thing when life brought me that challenge. When I sat alone in a little room for many years trying to develop and learn how to write. And as that began to pay off, I began to fill up, to feel that I was going to do something that maybe wouldn't bring me all the material reward in the world, but would give me a sense of meaning. And so that's sustained me. I feel comfortable in that sense and happy. And I wish others could feel the same way. And in being individuals, rather than spokesmen. I don't like it when I'm called a spokesman. I don't speak for for anybody but me. And but it's a journey that you would expect, and that many people are more afraid of than they need to be, I suppose, is my point. And I'm being coached here, but but yes, it is now beginning to happen in the white American community. There's a lot of, one of the great things about America is that we may be polarized, but we're open to self-examination. And I think America is going through a period of self-examination. The programs of the 60s that came and that all failed. The Great Society failed. Where Blacks are worse off today than they were back in the 60s when all of this started. Well, I think that is now something that people are beginning in the Black community to deal with and face and confront. That maybe identity is not our way out. Being blacker than thou is not our way ahead. Maybe we have to actually develop skills and become competitive and identify with the modern world rather than calling it racist every time we get a little bit afraid and calling it racist again. That point of view is exhausted. It's worn out and it's kept us backwards. And so it's, I feel I was on the right side of the fence from the beginning, and grateful, deeply grateful for the journey.
I want to go ahead, Eli.
Yeah, like maybe a little perspective. A lot of times people don't know where the phrase Black Power come from, but it was the last civil rights march of 1967 or something close to there.
67, yeah.
James Meredith started the march. I'm not going to tell the whole story, but it's worth looking it up. It's a great story. He gets shot. So James Meredith gets shot. King comes in, Martin Luther King comes in, Stokely Carmichael comes in. Basically, they walked from Memphis down to Jackson, Mississippi, and the idea of James Meredith's goal was to march against fear, was to get the Blacks, like the sharecroppers, to get over the fear that they actually could vote. they actually could, that's the two things, bone and beer. Throughout the whole walk, Carmichael and King are arguing over the phrase Black Power. Carmichael wants to stay there. King says, no, you can't stay there because it's like white power. All of a sudden, we're trying to get rid of that. Well, Carmichael win, and so then, but it's a very powerful moment because all of a sudden you have these sharecroppers in a park and they're surrounded by whites on the side, and the whites are taking names. And Carmichael has to say Black Power several times before the sharecroppers respond back. Because you get over the fear, so it's a very powerful moment, but at the same time, it kind of begins identity politics. And so if you think about it, to this day, we're still arguing over the same battle. The king was trying to say, no, you cannot go back into race. It's a trap. So it's a great little moment in history. But
yeah. No, thank you.
The conflict is the conflict between tribalism and democracy. And we moved to Black Power. We went into tribalism and ran into all the problems that tribes run into. We became narrow, too inwardly focused, isolated from the mainstream, resentful, militant, rather than facing the fact that we were now trying to get over 4 centuries of horrific oppression, and we were far, far behind. In the neighborhood I grew up, most people could not read or write. They came out of the South, the Southern, the cotton field. We needed development, we still do. Yet we talk about diversity and inclusion and intersectionality and all sorts of things that people don't have the faintest idea what they are, or what they mean. While over here, our 4th graders can't read. Our children are coming out of public schools almost illiterate, unable, facing the high-tech, high-finance world of America. So identity doesn't foretell some grand glory that's going to come. Identity is the end of you. There's nowhere to go with it. It survives because whites buy it. They buy it. They'll sort of pat us on the head. Yes, I understand what it's like to be Black and so forth. But we suffer from it because it cuts us off from all the riches, the opportunities that are everywhere now in American life for Blacks. There's so many opportunities, so many scholarships, one of the things the Shelby Steele Foundation is and we're going to be, I guess, a part of that parade. We want to give away some scholarships. But we hope to do it by acknowledging people who want to take the time to become themselves, to develop their own voices, their own way of thinking, and certainly not turn on Black issues, but to find ways to approach, to come to American life as Americans and as citizens, rather than as Blacks. That's going to be the death of us if we keep doing that.
Just a logistical note here. We're approaching the bottom of the hour, halfway in our conversation. Again, in the next few minutes, we're going to open up to questions from you all, which you're welcome to enter in the chat feature. Just simply click on that chat button below and type in your question, and we'll get to those questions. I did want to raise a question about this discussion of Black Power, and wonder to both of you, but I'll start with you, Dr. Steele. Would you agree that given the centuries of oppression and suppression that led up into the civil rights movement of the 1960s, would you agree that Black Power could be seen as an essential, if not an important, if not essential, part of the transition to this broader, diverse, multicultural engagement, this owning of the responsibilities of freedom, which you talk, I think, so eloquently about, but that part of that trajectory, if you will, is overcoming the evil identity, the identity that had been cast. You know, to go back to what Eli was mentioning before, to have the freedom to be able to own that part of our identity, or the identity of a Black American, as part of a necessary trajectory toward full and total inclusion. Is that fair, or do you think from the beginning that Black Power was a road that was always headed toward tribalism?
That's a good question. I think of an Irish barkeep in Chicago, down the street from where I grew up, on the other side on the white side. Well, he's certainly Irish, and that means everything to him, and it's important. And he comes out once a year in his greenness and so forth, and he does the whole. But after that, he's an American, and he's so proud of that, and he's proud that his forebears worked it out so that they could come to America, and he could start out here. Well, isn't that the way probably 98% of the immigrants come to America, in looking for opportunity? And that's one of the great differences. Blacks, we came a different way, and that hurt us. But identity, when you get into a democracy that's basically free market and wide open, then you don't want the cloistered sort of inwardness of identity. You want expansiveness and openness. You want to take on America as a noble challenge, and you want to thrive here. That is no different at all for Blacks. We got lost in I think in Black Power, because anybody, individual group, can come to a point where you're using your identity to hide out. I didn't take the time to finish college. I didn't pursue that opportunity when it came open. But I'm got my fist and I'm down with the cause, and I'm going to be delivered because of my passionate identification with the tribe, with the group. I'm going to be saved as an individual. Well, that contradiction began to nag at me in the late 60s. And I could see really even then that this was going nowhere. And there's nowhere for your identity is just your identity. Nothing wrong with it, nothing great about it. It's not going to help you meet the challenges that you face in the modern high-tech world we live in. It's nice for, family picnics once or twice a year. Have a ball, play the music that comes from your ethnicity, whatever. The food, I love all sorts of foods. America's got all kinds of identity riches, you might call them, from other places. Well, that's wonderful, and I'm all for that. And make damn sure your kid can read it in the 4th grade. If you don't do that, what in the world is your identity going to do? It's going to give you a rationale to fail. It's going to give you a way to say it's racism that continues to stunt my life. and to cripple me, and it's white people who are doing it to me. Now I'll turn on the TV or whatever. Well, we need to back up our identity. I'm not interested in how Black you are. I'm interested in what you do. What have you made of yourself? How have you taken care of your family? Have you made sure your children were getting the best education possible? Were you working away at those kinds of things that all people who come to America have to work away at? And if they do, they thrive. And that's why we have a border problem today. These people are not coming here in the millions because of Mexican power or Costa Rican power or Cuban power. They're coming here because of American opportunity. Well, America, as far as I'm concerned, has paid the price for its history. Well, to the extent that you can do that, you really can't. But it's time for us as Black Americans to move away from identity into engagement with America. I want to be an American. And then way down the line somewhere, I'm Black too. I'm proud of that. I taught Black American literature for 20 years. I love the culture. And always will. And we produce so many geniuses, so many people who have done exactly what I'm talking about. I'm sitting here in my office. I have pictures. There's Miles Davis. There's Duke Ellington. There's Louis Armstrong. There's all. I love the culture, but it's not going to make sure that my kids can read. It's not going to make sure that the people in the neighborhood are held to some account. That the idea is to get off of welfare, become a part of the mainstream. To stop thinking you're going to, out of some argument for reparations or whatever, you're going to be spared that struggle. Embrace that struggle.
Eli, I want to come back to you. As you have said, your father was, and we've now learned in some new ways, took some very courageous steps to be in a small group of thinkers and social critics who were looking at the world in a different way and suffered the loss of friendships and even family relationships because of that. But it's not to say that that kind of courage is not required by those of your generation. I know that in the creation of the production of the video, What Killed Michael Brown, that you too had took some slings and arrows, both from Amazon, which was ostensibly originally signed up to be the distributor and host of that documentary, but I'm sure from others as well, because these remain, although I think we're seeing a flourishing of diverse thought in the Black community, it still remains predominant in a certain direction. And so talk to us a bit about what you faced for taking the direction that you have in producing the art that you have.
I think what we made, What Killed Michael Brown, I mean, that was we started that in at least 2018. So my father got canceled from his university probably in 1991. Was something, so that's like 27 years difference. At that point, I think we didn't care. To be honest with you, we were steady together in the family room, watching the whole Michael Brown thing happen on TV. And for us, it was just mind-boggling to see, okay, we kind of said, we'll wait for the evidence, the due process to begin. 2 weeks later, the autopsy report come out. There's no change in opinion. And so we started to really realize that we were witnessing the divide in America, where one side was totally onto the narrative the hand up the shoe narrative, and the other side was crying out, "Don't you see the evidence? Don't you see the two gunshots went up in the car that he shot the police officer? That doesn't matter anymore." And so that sort of fascinated us. And once we kind of understood that, we just sort of knew that nobody else would maybe tell the story or be able to tell it the way we did. And when I talked to my father about his past, be from East St. Louis, I said, that's the story there. That's we should use this background. We should do all of that. So we really approach it more from a creative, intellectual perspective as opposed to, we're breaking them through a taboo. And honestly, if we are breaking a taboo, well, who's making up this taboo? And why should these people have the power? I mean, that's the beauty of America, is that we can actually challenge the people in power without, I mean, cancellation it's a price you pay, of course, but it's not as bad as other countries where you can pay a far greater price. So we felt that, that we were able to bring a very strong perspective and not a dogmatic perspective, but more of a intellectual, real life experience. And I think once you have that, once you feel that your feet are on solid ground, it's easy to keep walking. And but from the first day I stepped into Ferguson, I found the people, even the people that were supporting Michael Brown, the family, were very open. The conversation was so much more open. It wasn't like the media, it wasn't like the university for Christianity. If you go to, I went to Claremont Mechanic College, and I don't know if you've been by Pomona, they took it down, but they had the New York Times article of Michael Brown and Darren Wilson, almost like a 10-foot mural. They crossed out every single word except for white cop, black victim, executed. And so I thought, okay, that's exactly what we're fighting again. This is Pomona College, one of the top colleges in America, and this is that's a view of a tragedy. And why would they do that? And so that we were just motivated at these to sort of not set the record straight, but also argue for our own perspective. And so I think at that time we were just ready to go.
I want to come back to the lens of academia, and I want to weave in some of the questions that we're now getting. One of the questions from one of our current students has to do with what new opportunities from a cultural perspective, besides making sure that literacy rates of Blacks increase, do you think the community needs to take in on the future? I wanted to spin that a bit, Dr. Steele, in thinking about academia, to wonder at the same time if great books, Western Civ programs, like to a degree we are here at the Graduate Policy School, should be better engaged with some of the geniuses, as you've pointed out, great Black authors and social critics over the years. Certainly the recent ones, like yourself, and certainly Thomas Sowell, but also a Langston Hughes and a James Baldwin and others. To what degree do you think academia and those that are focused more on the tradition of a Western Civ core are or should be engaging more directly with these authors and thinkers?
Well, they certainly should. I think the greatest American novel ever written was written by Ralph Ellison, and the title is The Invisible Man. It is breathtaking. What I taught, I used to teach it in a graduate seminar, and that we'd study the whole book for one full semester. In most American classes, that book is not there. Yet it covers the American cultural life, world, really better than anybody. It's the command of writing and storytelling, and along with a philosophical sort of meaning that he is constantly reaching for. Just absolutely amazing work that's not there. Academia has been pitiful, and now they are even worse, because they're saying we've got to isolate by race even more. And so that's our solution to the problem, is we're going to set up more Black literature classes, and we're going to keep the whiteys out. Well, you know, it's I have to watch my language here, but that's a tragedy. That's what happened to us, and the blessing, once again, the blessing of my life, of my being, is America. America is the place that evolved to a point where I could be Shelby Steele and still survive. I don't know many other places. I'm not aware of any other places like that. Well, that's what I think. That's what my advice to is don't become Black. Is the young people, don't become Black. You're already Black. You're born that way. You're going to die that way. Become an American. That's the greatest. That's, as far as human evolution goes, that's the high point. You're not going to get much better. Black power can be enunciated here in America, can stir the pot for a number of years and so forth, and then people move on. We examine everything. Now we're looking at diversity and critical race theory, and is this real? Well, what country would come to a place where you take a problem like that, critical race theory, you put it on the table, you let everybody take their shot, you let everybody, you work it out, sometimes in a not very pretty way. But America works things out. It worked out slavery. It worked out Jim Crow. It will work out the Great Society by Lyndon Johnson. It's supposed to be a gift, a reparation to Black Americans, and turned out to be another oppression. Well, in America, we can say the Great Society has become the #1 oppression that Blacks face. It takes an agency of their life away from them. How could you treat people worse than that? Well, that's what I love about America. That's why I'm an American first. I'm a Black, probably 5th or 6th down the line. And that's where we want to go. We don't want a race that, where a gun is pointed to my head. I have to behave that won't work. But
so your thinking on that in particular is these great authors and thinkers, and I would include again you and Soul and others, that needs to be woven into existing Western Civ American Studies curriculum, as opposed to separated into its own.
Yeah, and I say that as somebody who started my career following the Black Power model and teaching a class in African American literature, and that was it. I'm now, the irony is just painful. I'm now enforcing segregation and telling myself I'm doing something wonderful. I'm giving Black kids a chance to form their identity. No, I've learned as much I have learned from reading as much from white writers, more. There are so many. What am I supposed to do? Ignore Shakespeare and ignore Norman Mailer, Saul Bellow, Philip Roth? I'm going to ignore those people? They don't have any relevance to me. They're gifts. They're there for me to apply myself to try to understand, to try to expand. I'm a part of that community. I'm not a part of the narrow Black community that just wants to read only Black writers who are angry. Got that point about 50 years ago. What now? Why are our families falling to pieces? Why does 80% of all Black children are raised in homes with no father? How do you presume to overcome that? Without a family life, without family, life is very difficult, if not impossible. What is it about us that won't speak up about that? Why don't we protest that within our own group? If we care so much about other people, other Blacks, why don't we level with them and say, you can believe anything you want, but if you don't raise your children, they're going to have trouble. And you're going to be responsible for it.
Well, let's talk about, I'm sorry, Eli, did you want to add there? I just want to get to the foundation. But
the big point I think a lot of it is that after these dishes, being Black, being coming out of all that oppression, that was a big thing to hold over white people, because you should get a lot of power out of that. I mean, you should always, you should come up with numbers, you should look at the disparities and say, you owe us this. So I think today, a lot of Blacks, especially more elite, like in the academic or in corporation, they don't want to lose that power. And so I think that's the unspoken thing in America today. They just don't want to give up that power that comes with their race. And white people continue, more white liberals continue to get that power. But that's sort of the unspoken thing, is that they feel as if they give up that power, that all of a sudden they can no longer rely on being Black. It's all on them. So there is that power that they should not give up.
I want to talk about, just to follow the irony along, Dr. Steele, in talking about providing opportunity, and that is with the Shelby Steele Foundation. I just wanted to read from the website, and we'll put a link to the foundation in the chat so others can look at it as well in more detail. The Shelby Steele Foundation seeks to support original thinkers and their endeavors through grants. Due to culture war biases, many worthy individuals who embrace the American principles do not receive funding from key philanthropic organizations. Shelby Steele knows how crucial outside funding has been to his long career of original thinking, and knows that identifying promising projects is a key element in making America better. Whether it is a business or creative endeavor, the foundation seeks to fill that gap by identifying projects that embody its mission and are worthy of support. So maybe just as a quick start, how did the idea for a foundation begin before we get into the specifics?
You want to tell?
Well, I think the story, I'll be brief, but in 2013, my father got a letter in the mail from a TV producer who produced a show called Queen for a Day. Like it's older generation narrative. Yep. Probably one of the biggest shows. And my father thought it was a scam, so he threw the letter away. Last year, so 9 years later, 9 years later, they were like, I guess it was BE State or something. I don't know how much money was in that thing, but they were like, no, you guys are the last one. Just trying to wrap this up. Here's the money. And so we shut the money. So we thought, okay, well, what can we do with it? Like, how can we, usually in the name of good? And I think part of it was we just looked at my father's life, even my own life, being in the film business. It's gotten so ridiculous that if you want to apply for a documentary grant, you have to represent the community that you want to make a documentary of. Well, what communities do I represent? I'm multiracial, I'm deaf, but I'm not part of any multiracial or deaf community. So these grant bodies are putting all these restrictions, you have, and it becomes ridiculous because if I believe that I cannot make one documentary, except for maybe how Jack became Black.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, because that's sort of more autobiographical. But then everything else, what? The South Side of Chicago. I mean, my family from there, but I'm not from there, but I get maybe that close enough. But the point is, and that's not the same generation as my father's generation.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just ridiculous, all the limits that the organizations are putting on. And I see more and more restriction, and it's gotten so bad that people are emailing the organizations like 1,000 times trying to seek clarification. It's ridiculous. So we wanted to basically go back to the good old days where you could just apply, and if you have a great idea or if you have some sort of a pathway that you want to pursue, that's what we call the original thinkers. It's sad that we have to use that label, but we have become, when I was growing up, the worst thing you should become was a conformist. And that's where we are today. We should conform to the racial ideologies of today, whatever ideology, we have to conform to that. So we are looking for non-ideological people who are more focused on the American principle and want to use those principles to advance thought in our society.
Now, as I understand it, the foundation works in two different program areas. One is to support projects of independent thinkers, and the others through scholarships. Shelby, talk to us a bit about how you thought about those two. I think Eli has explained the project piece, but the scholarship piece.
Well, I think one of the things that had bothered me for a number of years now is that there are young people who starting out in university life and so forth, looking for careers, and yet they probably more than anybody else are put upon by these political racial ideologies where they're supposed to feel this way about equity, and they're supposed to then they're supposed to look at intersectionality and their thinking, their orientation is prescribed ideologically, and they're afraid. It's been made clear to them that they will be canceled if they don't go this way, and that people who are canceled are heaped with scorn and so forth. We would like to support those kids who come along, not kids, but people, adults, who come along resisting that and insisting on being themselves and challenging the idea that they owe more to their identity than to themselves. People who are in the world of writing, the thing that you look for in a great writer is, do they have a voice that is their own? I can read one sentence from Saul Bellow, and I know it's Saul Bellow. Well, that's maybe not the best analogy, but it's what we want to encourage people on that journey who I think they're going to be the future. They're going to be I can remember Coleman Hughes meeting him for the first time. He's still extremely young person. Well, wow, this is somebody you want to watch. You want to help along. You want to in whatever way you possibly can. So that's what we're looking for. And also I'm getting queued up again here.
You're not just a person.
But that's what we sort of want is to encourage.
And as we near the end of our time, what is the best way for folks who may be watching this or know of others that are seeking opportunities in support of projects or scholarship support? What is the best way for them to avail themselves?
Eli?
Just email us through the website,
Okay.
And yeah, we're open to
I just
everyone.
posted it in the chat for folks.
Yeah, I
to
would
be
do
able
the
to
website because we just started, so we're kind of using
Yep.
the book years just to get our ground and talking to people, get your advice and how we proceed. But by all means, if we can't know about it, we can't know who they need unless you email us. So I encourage email us.
Well, I see we're at our time, and I want to be mindful of everyone's time. But Dr. Steele, so grateful for you and for this time. Eli, thank you for the incredible work that you're doing. And we are honored to count you as an alum here of the graduate policy program. And I'm grateful for our
program.
friendship. And so with that, thank you all for joining us. Really appreciate your taking lunchtime out to be a part of this conversation. Please stay tuned for future programs from the School of Public Policy. Please have a great rest of your day, and we'll be in touch soon. Thanks so much.